Good morning, peeps. Yeah, that sound you hear is rain hitting the top of the fishing lab, man. I had intended on fishing today, but I got up this morning at like 5:30, and it was like a typhoon out there, dude. So I didn't want to risk it. So today we are going to be moving right into part 2 of the how-to, or how I should say, catch sheepshead. Let me take a drink of my coffee, man. I got black coffee in a wine glass. It's kind of like redneck bougie. But anywho, a couple things I want to cover before I get started. First is this right here. This jig I purchased from Lofton Creek Seafood, and you guys know I'm a sucker for supporting local folks that create gear and equipment for fishing, and this is one of those stories, man. So I go in there and she says she started carrying sheepshead jigs, so of course I purchased some of them. She said she was approached by a local guy who wanted to sell some of these to the store, so they bought some. And she presented them to me, and of course I bought some. But I ended up contacting the folks that make these. It's a guy named David and Waylon, and they bought some molds, and they're kicking these jigs out, and I love them. And I love the whole story of supporting local fishermen. So probably in the near future, I'm gonna introduce you guys to David and Waylon and hopefully get them on the show. But here's a picture of them. And here's a photograph of the new jig they're designing. I haven't got my hands on any of these yet, but I'm kind of excited to do it, man. And he said he's gonna make me up some, and as soon as they do, I will get them on the show and see how they work, man. But very cool story. I'm very excited to support these two and see how far they take this thing, man. So, a couple other things. Second thing is, after the last video, I got some comments on my video, which I appreciate. I'm gonna answer your comments, guys. I'm not one of those dudes that just ignores things. But one of the comments was, what about float rigs? Yes, float rigs are awesome for sheepshead. However, I don't use float rigs. I know a lot of people do, so I don't want to talk about things that I am not experienced with and that I haven't personally used, if that makes sense. I have nothing bad to say about them. People use them, they work. I don't, so I can't tell you about them, you know what I'm saying? The third thing I wanted to talk about is recently on a show for a couple anglers that I watch, I had noticed, or I listened to some information of somebody that was putting out some tips on sheepshead, and they specifically mentioned the color of jigs to attract big ones. Yeah, so I don't know. Fishermen are superstitious, I guess. But I've caught big ones on white jigs. I've caught big ones on pink jigs, chartreuse, brown. This one right here just jacked a 23.5 incher. This is like a teal color. So you gotta take some information that you hear on YouTube and on the internet with a grain of salt. I'm not going to tell you anything that I have not personally done or personally used. And in the realm of colors of jigs to attract bigger sheepshead, yeah, I'm up in the air. I don't know. I know there's a lot of pompano fishermen who swear, you know, pink floats attract more pompano. Chartreuse, you know, fish bites attract more pompano. Whether that's true or not, I've seen people painting you know, their weights, and before you know it, their whole rig looks like a daggum peacock. I don't know. I'm kind of along the lines of, or the train of thought where if you have something that they want to eat on your line and they can identify it as food, they're gonna eat it. Whether it's purple, pink, blue, black, orange, or otherwise, if they can identify it as food that they eat, they're gonna eat it. It's about as simple as that. So jigs are just a vessel. That's my opinion. You know, whether it's pompano, sheepshead, whatever. You know, I've caught just as many pompano on a bare hook with a piece of shrimp than I have with, you know, rainbow colored floats. The purpose of the float is to kind of keep the bait off the ground. So, I don't know. That's just me. So anyway, we're gonna flip this here camera around and we are gonna get into what baits I believe and that I use and every fisherman should have in their sheepshead arsenal, how I go about hooking them, and then what sensations or feelings you get when you have a sheepshead bite and how they kind of act on the line. Okay, we're gonna get into some of that as well because it's kind of unique with sheepshead and it can be pretty tricky. So let's just roll right into this thing, man. Let's do it. Ready? Break.
Uh-oh.
All right, now here you go, man. Okay, so first couple things you're gonna need to save yourself a lot of frustration and heartache is some shears. If you're gonna be using crabs, I would get some, these are just the Dollar General scissors, and the reason I buy these is because I have yet to find a fishing shear that has been able to survive salt water. I don't care what they are made of, that salt is eventually going to jack them up. So I'm constantly going to the dollar store and getting, you know, some scissors or shears for like, you know, $1.50 or whatever, because when they end up getting all this rust on them and no longer want to open, just chuck them and get some new ones, man. But if you're going to be working with crabs a lot, I would suggest getting some of these. They'll save you a bunch of heartache in the future. The next thing, which is kind of common sense, is some kind of knife. And I don't suggest, you know, buying a top-of-the-line knife, because if you're using it for fishing, you're in the same boat. Salt water's going to eat it up, no matter how much you take care of it. And, you know, I use WD-40 on most of my stuff. After every fishing trip, it is still going to get jacked up. So get yourself a knife that you can use for opening things like mussels and cutting crabs, all that kind of stuff. All right, so first bait we are going to talk about, the 3 baits that I keep in my arsenal. Number 1 is, not in any particular order, is the mud crab. Mud crabs I use almost exclusively for sheepshead if I can get them. Mud crabs are a little bigger crab. They're much more durable and they stay on the hook a lot better than fiddlers. So here we got one of these here, fellas. These guys are all live. I caught them yesterday. I planned on using them today. much larger than Fiddlers, okay? And if you guys have watched my how to catch or best bait for Sheepshead video, you'll see me catching these guys and how you can go about identifying them, because they are similar, especially the smaller ones. They are very similar to stone crabs. Stone crabs are regulated, you cannot use them, but you can use and catch mud crabs for bait. Alright, so hooking a mud crab. In my videos, you will see me do a couple things, alright? So, since they are a much hardier crab and their shells are pretty thick, what I do to hook these guys is you have your jig. You know, this is this is a fish taco. Is I find where the legs all connect right down here. Okay, there are some soft spots. So I'll take my hook and I'll stick it in to where that soft spot is, and then I'll work my way either all the way through, if it's a smaller crab, to the other side of where the legs are, or in this case, since he's a little bigger guy, I'll go to the back of the carapace where the top of the carapace connects to the bottom side there, and I'll get that hook all the way through so the barb is protruding. Okay? And that's basically it. So the bait is presented in the water like this right here. Alright? Now, some of the bigger crabs, what I will do, and I would probably do it to this guy, is I don't technically, well, sometimes I will cut their claws off, but I will go ahead and break their claws, just like that. You'll see in some of my videos where I'll smash up the crab's claws and or cut them off. If they have really long legs, I'll go ahead and cut those off. And there's two reasons I do that. One is it gets a lot of the scent of the crab into the water. The fish can identify, hey, maybe this guy's injured. I'm gonna go ahead and take advantage of it and make a meal out of this feller. And two, sometimes with the larger crabs, a sheepshead will go down there and grab a hold of the crab, and he'll just have the claw in his mouth. And then he'll travel around crushing up that claw, or he'll just peck at the crab, pecking at the claw itself, and you'll feel a little tug, and you go to set the hook and you'll miss the fish. So I'll break those claws, claws up, or take them, totally remove them. That way the fish will go ahead and grab the entire crab, because he knows he's not in any danger of, you know, getting pinched or whatever, and you can get a much better hook set on the fish. Tenfo. Alright, so that is mud crabs. That is my numero uno bait right there. So we're going to go ahead and put him back in my little mud crab box here. This guy over here is kind of upset. He's going to try to get me, man. Look at him. What up? These jokers will put a hurting on you too. Okay, so that guy, for example, for the larger mud crabs, okay, a lot of times I will purposely try to use larger mud crabs, and if I can get this fella here out, I'll show you what I do with them. Now, if they get a hold of you, man, they won't put a hurting on you. You think don't think for a minute that they can't they can't get you, because they can and they will. Damn dudes are getting each other. So this guy here, this is a pretty good sized mud crab, right? And I'm of the school where bigger bait catches bigger fish. However, I get some of these jokers that are like, you know, this big. That's all I can find. And what I do with your trusty old shears here is go ahead and get it right in the center. Crab. And boom. Cut them in half. All right, now you got all those wicked juices in there. Take your jig, put it inside that area that you just cut out the legs that we discussed earlier. See the area of the legs where it's nice and soft. And pop it out the other side. Get the barb and the hook protruding, and there you go. A lot of times if sheepshead do not want to bite, they're being very finicky, I'll chop a crab in half and throw it out there, and all those juices will get in the water, and it's almost like, you know, watching a chef slicing off pieces of prime rib, where you're just like, ooh, I'm gonna get some of that, and it might entice the fish to actually have a more aggressive bite. So sometimes I'll try that if they're just pecking away and they're not taking the crab. Tempo. All right, so that is mud crabs. Let's roll into bait number 2. Bait number 2 is everybody's go-to, the fiddler. Let us grab a fiddler. All right, fiddler, as you can see, fiddlers are much smaller than mud crabs. So with fiddlers, a lot of folks, you know, ask me, well, how do I hook them to keep the crab alive? How do I, you know, do this, do that? Honestly, any way you hook these jokers, they are going to die. I mean, eventually they have a big, you know, metal spike running through the center of them. They're going to die. If you want to keep them alive a little longer, center of the crab where the carapace connects, and you're just basically kind of hooking the smallest amount of the crab as you can and coming out the legs. So, right there. When you have him, he's going to do a little wiggle in. He'll stay alive much longer, and the bait is presented like that. You know, he's going to do a bunch of crawling around and wiggling, and hopefully entice a sheep to pick him up. Now, with that being said, if you hook them like that, it is extremely easy for a sheepshead to come up, crush that crab, and pull it right off the jig. When I use fiddlers, I will go through a ton of fiddlers per fish I actually catch, okay? Same thing goes for if you're using, you know, a drop shot or one of these other rigs. Look at, he's trying to get away right now. I'm going to do the same exact thing. You would take the hook, center the crab, and just get as little of the crab as you can on the hook. That way you're not disturbing their lungs, and they'll stay alive a little bit longer. Tempo. However, sheepshead will hit, I'll repeat that, they will hit a dead crab, 100%. If it's a fresh dead crab and it's sitting on the bottom or, you know, suspended, they will hit that joker. Don't think that all of your crabs have to be alive, because they do not. They will hit a dead crab, 100% they will. All right, next bait is, this is kind of an interesting bait, is mussels. Now this is a ½ pound of mussels, and I got them from our local grocery store, which is called Publix, for $2.84, man. So mussels are kind of interesting, right? You're definitely going to need a knife to open these jokers up. This guy is already opened up, so it's not going to be as big of a pain in the butt. But, so you crack the mussel open, Got all that nasty stuff. You want to get as much of that nasty stuff out as you possibly can because it's all going on the hook. So you scrape it with your knife. That's why I got gloves on, because these yogurts will make a daggone mess. They have that connective tissue that connects the muscle itself to the shell. You're going to take your knife and scrape all that off. So you get a gelatinous, nasty pile of mess here. I suggest doing this before you go fishing. Alright, now you got this big old pile of goo here. If you're using the jig, there's no scientific method or way of doing this, but you're just going to keep on hooking it. And I like to find the tougher portions of the mussel. I don't know what organ that is, that little dark black spot, but that seems to be a little tougher than the rest of the mussel. And just keep on wrapping it around and rehooking it, wrapping it around and rehooking it. In this video here, you can see this mussel hooking it this way on a jig in action. Okay, and there you go. Now, another way you can hook a mussel is in a video I did about a year ago. I don't always use them, although they're an extremely good bait because of all of this you see here. They're extremely messy. When you freeze them like that and put them in a bag, they're a little more easy to deal with, but man, sheeps really do love to eat themselves a daggone mussel, man. Alright, so now let's talk about the way sheepshead hit, okay? What I found with the mussels is they, you know, since there is no shell on these things, and they know that, they pretty much inhale the mussel and they just travel on and go on to their next thing, and you can set the hook pretty easily. There's not a whole lot of pecking. But with crabs, I've noticed with sheeps that they may not even pick the bait up a lot of times. They'll see it on the ground and they'll peck and they'll peck and they'll peck, and you'll feel these little dink 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 dinks, and you're thinking, oh, that's a small fish. And the way I describe some of their bites, which is very unusual, and I hope I'm getting my point across, is that it almost feels like this. In some of my videos, you'll hear me say it feels like a scrape. If I can describe the way a sheep's head bites when you're holding the rod, it almost feels like a slow tug, like a slow scrape. There's not a lot of really quick pecks like you would feel with, let's say, a snapper or a small croaker or one of those, what do you call them, pinfish, where it's just like a machine gun tap, 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 tap on the rod. If you feel that, it's not going to be a sheep. What you'll get with these pecks is a small, it feels like a scrape, like this. It's like crush, crush, and then you'll feel that the fish relieve that tension in your line and actually pick the whole bait up. Now, sheeps will crush a hook. I mean, they will demolish a daggum hook, especially if you're using one of these smaller, thinner hooks like this right here. And another reason I use these hooks is because they have, specifically with mussels, is they have a series, I don't know if you can see that, of barbs on the shaft of the hook, which is very good for mussels. It'll help keep that mussel on the hook. But keep in mind, when you're using mussels, you're only going to get one, maybe two fish out of one of those things because they are so fragile, you know what I'm saying? So you're going to be cleaning mussels here and there and everywhere. What I suggest is you get yourself a little jar of some sort and go ahead and crack you a bunch of mussels beforehand, before your fishing trip, put them in the refrigerator, and then, you know, when you go on your fishing trip or whatever, take that entire jar with you. That way you don't spend a lot of good fishing time cracking and cleaning mussels to get them on a hook. You know what I'm saying? So that's my suggestion. I use a lot of those little jars. My daughter used to have a pet gecko, and every time I would buy mealworms for her gecko, they would come in a container like this right here. I keep my jigs and mussels and stuff like that in this little container here. So go ahead and fill that up. If you're going to use them fresh like this and not frozen in the bag like I've showed you in the previous video, go ahead and fill that container up. Throw it in the old tackle box with you, and that way when you go to fish, you're not extremely frustrated spending most of your day cleaning mussels. Good to go? All right.